In 47 blistering seconds, live before 20 million Americans, Clarence Thomas's gavel cracked like a gunshot, and the words, "You're just a freeloader," sliced through the chamber. Gasps ricocheted off marble walls, cameras locked on Jasmine Crockett's unflinching stare. And then she struck back. What did she say next that made the most powerful man in the room flinch and the entire nation erupt? The doors swung open before the cameras had even finished their slow sweep of the room. Jasmine Crockett stepped in like a storm front rolling over calm water. Steady, deliberate, impossible to ignore. No smile, no glance to the sides, just eyes locked on the far end of the chamber where her opponent sat. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. Each step a countdown. People noticed. Reporters stopped mid-sentence, their fingers hovering above keyboards. Even the activists clutching signs lowered them just a little, watching her cross the aisle like she owned it. It wasn't arrogance. It was purpose, the kind you can feel in your chest. At the far table, Clarence Thomas shifted in his chair. He didn't stand. He didn't need to. Instead, he leaned toward his lawyer, whispered something, and let a faint smile curl across his face. The kind of smile that says, "I know how this ends." The cameras caught every flicker of expression, every tightening jaw, every slow inhale in the room. It felt like the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. And somewhere between those two tables, between her steady stride and his waiting smirk, the air turned heavy. This wasn't just another hearing. This was live, coast to coast, every second broadcast into living rooms, cafes, and office screens. And with millions watching, one question hung in the air like a live wire. Who's about to take control of this room? Jasmine didn't sit right away. She placed her notes on the table, adjusted the mic, and let the silence hang just long enough to make every camera zoom in. Then she looked straight ahead, not at the senators, not at the crowd, but at Clarence Thomas. Her voice was steady, clear enough to cut through the static. Today isn't about politics, it's about the truth. No fancy lead-up, no warm smile, just a line that hit like the first crack of thunder before a storm. She started telling them about a family in her district, parents working 2 jobs, still losing their home because the system didn't care. She spoke about a veteran who fought for the country, only to be denied the benefits he was promised. The room was quiet, but out there in America, people leaned in closer to their screens. In living rooms, diners, office break rooms, the volume went up. And TV ratings spiked in real time, and the feed producer whispered, "We've got every eyeball in the country right now." Across the table, Clarence Thomas didn't move much. Arms crossed, shoulders relaxed, the faintest smirk on his lips. He looked like a man waiting for someone to walk into his trap. His eyes didn't blink, as if daring her to keep going. Jasmine could feel it, the weight of the moment pressing down. One wrong note and the whole thing could tilt against her. But one right move, she could shift the ground under his chair. Millions were watching, holding their breath. And somewhere behind that smirk, Thomas was ready to fire back. But when the first counterpunch lands, will Jasmine hold her ground? Jasmine was mid-sentence, laying out the pattern of decisions that had hurt ordinary Americans, when Thomas leaned toward his mic. His voice cut across hers like a blade. "That's enough. We're not here for speeches," he said, tone cool, deliberate, the kind of interruption meant to rattle, not correct. A murmur rippled through the room, quick and sharp, then faded into heavy silence. On the broadcast, the camera didn't flinch. It had caught every detail, the shift in Jasmine's shoulders, the faint tightening of her jaw. From her seat just behind, Emily Tran met Jasmine's eyes. No words, just a look. Part warning, part steadying hand. The kind of look that says, "Don't take the bait." Jasmine's fingers tapped the edge of the table once, twice. A pause long enough for the tension to grow teeth. The hearing room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in, trapping every ounce of heat and expectation. Out in living rooms and cafes, people leaned forward. They knew the game. A sudden jab to throw her off balance, make her lose the calm she'd built. And they also knew this was the kind of moment where everything could shift. The smirk was back on Thomas's face, but his eyes stayed fixed, unblinking. Jasmine drew a slow breath. The trap was set. Is this the moment the trap is sprung? Thomas leaned forward, slow and deliberate, the way a predator might before it strikes. His hand adjusted the mic, the metal stand giving a faint creak that the room somehow seemed to hear. Then with perfect clarity, he let it drop. You're just a freeloader. No raise in volume, no theatrics, but the words landed like a hammer on glass. The hearing room froze. You could hear the air change, like someone had just slammed a door on a quiet night. Woifern, the mics caught the first wave of whispers, quick bursts of disbelief. Cameras swept across the chamber. A senator's brow arched, a reporter's pen stopped mid-word, an activist's jaw clenched. Miles away in Atlanta, a small family sat in their living room. The mother's hand flew to her mouth as her eyes welled up. They used to call us that, she whispered, voice breaking. Her teenage son, glued to the TV, didn't look away from the screen. Back in the chamber, Jasmine didn't move. Not yet. Ewan, her gaze stayed locked on Thomas, reading every line on his face. He leaned back in his chair like a man satisfied with his strike, letting the echo of the insult do the rest. Millions of viewers were feeling the same thing at once. Shock, anger, curiosity, a hunger to see what she would do next. And in that second, it wasn't just a courtroom insult. It was a wound ripped open for the whole country to see. How do you answer an insult the whole nation just heard? Jasmine leaned in, eyes locked on Thomas. Say that again, she said. Calm, steady, but sharp enough to cut through marble. The room stilled. Then, without breaking eye contact, she told them about her grandmother, a wartime nurse called an ungrateful drain when she asked for her pension. Her father working 3 jobs, yet branded as someone who lived off the system. Her mother denied a loan not for lack of income, but for her address. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but carried a weight that cut through the air. She told them about her grandmother, a wartime nurse who came home to be called an ungrateful drain when she asked for her pension. About her father, who worked 3 jobs, yet was told he lived off the system when he fought for fair treatment. About her mother, denied a loan not for lack of income, but because of the neighborhood she lived in. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Each word was a slow turn of the screw, each story a mirror held up to the man across from her. The silence after every sentence felt heavier than the one before. Thomas had thrown an insult meant to bruise her, but now, with the nation watching, she was asking him, without ever using the words, to look at the bruise he'd left on generations. Will the truth cut deeper than the insult? Out beyond the chamber's marble walls, the country was already on fire. Phones buzzed nonstop, screens lighting up in kitchens, offices, and bus stops. On Twitter, Freeloader Gate rocketed to the top before the hearing even hit its halfway mark. Clips of Jasmine's unflinching stare and Thomas's cutting words were everywhere. TikTok edits, Instagram reels, Facebook shares. The moment spread like a spark through dry grass. Everyone had an opinion, and they weren't holding back. In a small Ohio apartment, a retired veteran picked up the phone. His voice was rough but steady. Tell her we're with her, he told the local news station, like it was both a message and a promise. Inside the chamber, the shift was subtle but real. Reporters leaned in closer. Senators exchanged quick, sharp glances. And then just behind Jasmine, Reverend Samuel Brooks gave a small, almost hidden nod, the kind that said, "It's time." The air felt heavier now, charged with something more than politics. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was a fight for trust, lived for the whole country to see. Has the tide just turned, or is this the calm before the real storm? Emily Tran didn't say a word. She just slid the thick folder across the polished wood toward Jasmine, the motion slow enough for the nearest camera to catch. Jasmine's eyes flicked down, scanning the first page, then back up, locking on Thomas. She asked for the projector. The staffer hesitated for half a beat, then dimmed the lights. Ere a large screen behind the committee table came alive with the first image. Clarence Thomas, drink in hand, standing on the deck of a gleaming luxury yacht. A low murmur rippled through the room. The next slide, Thomas at a private gala, laughing with men whose names were already under investigation. The kind of crowd that didn't need name tags because everyone knew exactly who they were. The camera found Thomas's face. The easy smirk from earlier was gone. His jaw tightened. His fingers tapped once on the table, then stilled. He glanced toward his lawyer, but the man kept his eyes forward. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She let each photo breathe, each one land with its own weight. "These are not vacations," she said evenly. "They're transactions, paid for by people with interest before this court." Reporters scribbled furiously. Somewhere in the back, an aide muttered into a phone, already leaking the images to the press. The tension in the air felt different now. Less like a debate, more like the slow tightening of a vice. And sitting under the bright lights, Clarence Thomas had no gavel to hide behind. Hina, the evidence was speaking for itself. What happens when the evidence speaks louder than the man himself? Thomas cleared his throat and leaned into the mic, voice suddenly faster, sharper. He started weaving legal jargon like a net, citing precedents, obscure clauses, and technical definitions, trying to drown the images under a flood of complicated words. To the untrained ear, it almost sounded convincing. Almost. Jasmine didn't let him finish. She leaned forward, eyes locked on his, and cut clean through his sentence. "We're talking about integrity, not legal loopholes." Her tone wasn't loud, but it was final. The kind of line that doesn't invite a rebuttal. The reaction was instant. A wave of rolled through the public gallery, half shock, half satisfaction. Even a few reporters lowered their pens for a second, just to take in the moment. Thomas blinked, just once, but it was enough for the cameras to catch. He tried to reset, shifting in his chair, but the rhythm was gone. The control he'd had a minute ago was slipping. Jasmine didn't press with another question right away. She let the silence work, let the weight of her words settle over the room. The tension felt thicker now, like the air before a summer storm. In living rooms across the country, viewers sat up straighter. The roles were shifting, and they could feel it. Will the judge become the one being judged? Jasmine shifted in her seat, but her voice stayed steady. She told the room about a family from her district, a mother, a father, and 2 kids who lost their home after the bank refused to restructure their loan. They had jobs, they paid their taxes, but the system saw them as numbers, not people. Then she drew the line straight to the man across from her. "While they were packing their belongings into cardboard boxes," she said, "you were stepping onto yachts, attending galas, and enjoying benefits most Americans can't even dream of." Her words didn't need volume. They had weight. The camera cut to the gallery. An older man in a worn suit sat frozen, eyes glassy. A single tear rolled down his cheek, and the nation saw it live. Somewhere, millions felt the same lump in their throat. Thomas didn't speak. He didn't move. For the first time, he looked less like a man in control and more like one under a spotlight he couldn't dim. Jasmine let the silence stretch, knowing it would hit harder than any follow-up question. And in homes across America, people were thinking the same thing. Maybe this was the moment everything started to crack. Is this the blow that will end his credibility? Reverend Brooks had sat still for nearly 2 hours, a quiet shadow just behind Jasmine. Here his hands rested on the head of his cane, eyes steady, like a man measuring every word spoken in that room. But when Jasmine's last statement faded into silence, he rose. The wooden bench groaned under his weight, a small sound that somehow made the entire chamber pause. He didn't rush. He stood with the slow, deliberate grace of someone who had marched in the heat of Selma, faced fire hoses, and buried friends for the cause of justice. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep, worn, but unshakable. "How we fought for this seat to be a voice for the voiceless, not to silence them." The sentence rolled across the room like a low drumbeat. He didn't need a microphone. The air itself seemed to carry his words. The marble walls bounced the sound back, making it feel as if it came from everywhere at once. For a moment, no one moved. The reporters' pens hovered above paper. The senators sat frozen, glancing at each other, unsure how to respond. Even the hum of the lights seemed quieter. Then from the back row, a single clap broke the stillness. Sharp, defiant. Another joined it, then another. The applause swelled, moving forward in waves, filling the chamber until it became a roar. Some stood as they clapped, others shouted, "That's right!" The energy crackled. It wasn't just support, it was release. Thomas kept his eyes forward, jaw clenched tight. Jasmine turned her head just enough to meet the Reverend's gaze. We gave her a slow nod, the kind that said without words, "They're with you now." Can one voice spark a national roar? The applause didn't die down. It transformed. One by one, people in the gallery pushed themselves to their feet. Then almost in unison, the words rang out, "Justice for all." The chant was sharp, powerful, bouncing off the marble and wood like a rallying cry in a street march. Reporters swung their cameras toward the crowd, but one lens stayed fixed on Jasmine. Ochu, the overhead lights caught her face at just the right angle, a soft glow wrapping around her like a halo. She didn't speak, didn't raise a hand. She just stood there, eyes steady, letting the moment belong to the people. Down on the floor, senators shifted uncomfortably. Some tried to quiet the crowd, others just watched, sensing the shift in the room's center of gravity. Thomas didn't move, but his fingers drummed against the table. Faster now. The chant grew louder, voices layering over one another until the sound filled every inch of the space. You could feel it in your chest. Not noise, but something deeper, the sound of years of frustration finding release. For viewers at home, the image was striking. Jasmine at the center, bathed in light, a wave of standing citizens behind her. In that frame, it wasn't just a hearing anymore. Socrates, it looked like the start of something bigger. Will this moment become the image that defines a generation? The chant still echoed when Jasmine stepped forward. She placed both hands on the table, letting the noise settle just enough for her voice to cut through. "I didn't come here for permission," she said, each word crisp, deliberate. "I came here to reclaim justice for the people." The gallery erupted again, but this time it was a rolling wave. Cheers, clapping, a few voices shouting her name. Jasmine didn't turn to them. Instead, she lifted her chin and looked straight into the lens of the main camera, the one broadcasting her face to millions of homes. "And I am not alone." The words landed like the final strike of a gavel, but they didn't close the moment. They expanded it. Out there in kitchens, classrooms, and break rooms, people sat a little straighter, as if she were speaking directly to them. Thomas shifted in his seat but didn't respond. His silence, paired with her unwavering gaze, told its own story. And in the control room, a producer mouthed to a colleague, "That's the clip." For a heartbeat, the room seemed to hold still, a live, unedited image of defiance and unity. It wasn't just her fight anymore. It was theirs. Is this the day America truly stood up? Across America, screens lit up with the replay. News anchors spoke over looping footage of Jasmine leaning into the mic, Thomas frozen in his chair. Some commentators called it the most powerful moment in a congressional hearing in decades. Others tried to downplay it, framing it as political theater. The arguments were loud, fast, and everywhere. On YouTube, the clip climbed past 1 million views in its first hour. By the fourth, it had hit 5 million, a surge that sent it straight to trending. Twitter threads dissected every second, from the way Jasmine paused before speaking to the flicker in Thomas's expression when the photos hit the screen. Cable news ran split-screen debates, one side praising her as a voice for the people, the other accusing her of grandstanding. In diners, in gym lobbies, even at gas stations, the clip played on mounted TVs while strangers traded opinions like trading cards. The moment was no longer contained to that hearing room. It was alive, moving through conversations, group chats, and morning radio shows. Every replay seemed to carry more weight, more momentum, as if the nation itself was leaning in to hear it again. Will this echo fade, or will it grow louder? It was long past midnight, and the Capitol was quiet. Jasmine sat alone in her office, the city lights spilling in through the blinds, painting faint stripes across her desk. Her phone screen glowed in the dim light. Hundreds, then thousands of messages pouring in. Veterans, single parents, students, retirees, all telling her the same thing in different words. "You spoke for us." She scrolled slowly, letting each one sink in. A woman from Detroit sent a photo of her kids holding a sign that said, "Justice for all." A miner from West Virginia wrote, We've been waiting for someone to stand up like that. Jasmine's chest felt heavy, not with exhaustion, but with the weight of what those messages meant. Her phone rang. Reverend Brooks's voice came through, deep and steady. "You gave them hope again," he said. "No speeches, no preamble. Just that." She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. She could hear in his tone that it wasn't just a compliment, it was a responsibility. Outside, the city was sleeping. Inside, Jasmine knew sleep wouldn't come easy. Not after a day like this. Not after feeling the pulse of a nation respond to her words. What will she do with the hope she's reignited? The clock on her desk read 2:17 a.m. Jasmine sat in front of a small camera. The office still lit only by the warm glow of a single lamp. She didn't wear a blazer now, just a simple blouse. Sleeves rolled up, the fatigue in her eyes softened by something deeper. Resolve. She took a slow breath, hit record, and began. Her voice was steady, almost intimate, as if she were speaking directly to one person instead of millions. "When we stand together," she said, "we are unstoppable. No fire, no theatrics, just the kind of truth that doesn't need to be dressed up, the kind that makes people stop scrolling and listen." She didn't talk long. No bullet points, no politics. Just a reminder of what they'd done today, and what they could still do if they stayed united. When she finished, she leaned in slightly, letting her words hang in the quiet. Then she reached forward, stopped the recording, and sat back in her chair. On the final cut, the video faded to black. A single line appeared on the screen in white letters. "What would you have said in that room?" It wasn't just a question. It was an invitation, a challenge, a dare. Somewhere out there, she knew people would answer. And that was the point. True power doesn't lie in the seat you hold, but in the courage to stand up and speak for those without a voice. Together, we don't just resist injustice. We create moments that change history. If you were in that room, would you let silence define you, or let your voice define the moment? If this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Like, share, and pass it on. Because justice only lives when we keep it alive. Subscribe to First Shock and hit the bell, because the next moment that changes history could be yours. Which part made you feel it the most? Tell us in the comments. Your voice matters, and the nation needs to hear it. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching.